Welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership with your host, Stephanie Olson, speaker, author, addiction, sexual violence, and resiliency expert. Hello, I'm so excited to introduce to you Jenna Ashlyn. Jenna is a volunteer for Southern Ohio's Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program, providing support and services to victims of abuse. She studied creative writing at both the University of Rio Grande and Marshall University, where she worked for the campus literary magazine, etc. Jenna's writing has appeared in numerous literary magazines, including Night Roses, the Atwood Review, and Poet's Choice. In 2015, she won the overall writing award in the StarJewel Nationals and Talent Showcases Art Contest. And in 2019, she was nominated for a Maier Award, which celebrates the best writing by Marshall University students. In 2020, Jenna released her debut novel, Within the Gray. And she just released a new novel called Sheila'sMen, and we are going to hear her very powerful story. Welcome, Jenna. Hello, and welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership. I am so excited to be here with Jenna Ashlyn. Jenna, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me today. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Well, Jenna's got an outstanding story and an outstanding book, and I'm really excited to introduce both of those. But Jenna, your story and your book actually did not come without trauma and without pain, and it's definitely it's something that you have certainly experienced firsthand, even though it is fiction. Yeah. So share a little fiction. Is that with air quotes?
Fiction.
Got it. Okay. So share a little bit about your story and what brings you here today.
My story is complicated and long, and there's just so much to it that it's kind of hard to summarize it. But for the most part, it's just ending up from, I was actually widowed.
Yeah.
In the book, it says that the guy cheated on me, but like I already wrote about being widowed in my first book, which was Within the Gray, because it was like all the things that were supposed to have happened and how I wish they would have happened. Sheila'sMen is what really happened. So I went from this, traumatized, hugely in grief mindset, and I ended up in a relationship that even early on, I couldn't get out of. And it steadily progressed. And we were looking at a lot of narcissistic abuse, mental abuse, domestic violence. And we're not talking about, the traditional getting hit and leaving bruises. That's not my story. That's someone else's story. Most of mine is narcissistic abuse. There is a lot of mental abuse and manipulation. There is some violence, but not to that type of degree. Unfortunately, the largest part of my story is dealing with sexual assault, from sexual coercion, manipulation, and downright rape.
Wow. I think that the word domestic violence has kind of a misnomer, because when we think of the word violence, we often think of physical violence, hitting, but emotional and mental abuse and manipulation and coercion, and certainly sexual abuse and rape is violence. And I think those are really important things for people to understand, because we sometimes downgrade. I too come from a story of a marriage that had a lot of manipulation and emotional and verbal abuse, and some physical, but there's this kind of mentality to, well, he didn't hit me that much, so it's okay. But
Right.
That I really want to talk about narcissism with you, but those scars are deep.
They are very deep, very, very deep. And people really underestimate that, because they don't really understand what it actually is and what all it does to your mind and how it messes you up. And you have to completely retrain your brain on how to even function normally again, because you've been groomed or beaten down
Yes.
mentally to where you are not yourself anymore. And it's very, very traumatic, much more than some of their simpler forms of abuse. All of them are deeply traumatizing in many different ways. So I don't want to downplay that, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
it is very much underestimated.
I completely agree with you. And I always say the person who goes into, whether it be the grooming process or domestic abuse, dating, the person who goes in is never the same person who comes out.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So share a little bit with whatever you're comfortable with, but a little bit about what that narcissism looks like, because I think that's kind of a word that's thrown around quite a bit. And I think that true narcissists, the mental and manipulative, and it really is the coercion and the brainwashing that goes on is tremendous. So share a little bit about that.
It's hard to even know where to start sometimes with that, because you're right, it is everywhere. People, if you don't like someone, it tends to be, oh,
Yeah,
well, they're just a
they're a
narcissist. Oh,
narcissist,
they're,
right?
yeah. And that's not really true. A true narcissist really does have very strict patterns that they follow. At the heart of it all, they are so convinced that they are right
Mhm.
and that you are wrong, that there is no other truth for them. It is so in tune and ingrained in them that they have no idea
Yeah,
how abusive they really are. And so you take someone like that and you give them someone, they generally tend to find a supply or somebody who is very giving and empathetic and very loving. Those people are the best targets. The
right.
best people are the greatest targets and the easiest to be manipulated by a narcissist. And the thing is that they will start out as being very loving and very giving and very helpful for your situation. But over time, for me, it was almost overnight. It felt like they switched to where everything was about them and their needs. And it kind of keeps growing. And they are so convinced that they are right
Yeah,
that they can't admit any fault to anything ever. They have to be the center of attention. They
right.
have to be right. And they are so convinced in themselves that they will find a way to convince you that you are the problem. You are the one with the mental health issues. You are the one that's abusive. And that continues to grow in a really horrible process, because it starts out small and it continues until there's just nothing left of that sweet, empathetic person anymore.
Yeah. So before or when you started that relationship with him, did you see any red flags? You said it just seemed like a kind of a switch overnight, but were there any red flags that you can say, okay, that was something I should have avoided, or that was something I should have avoided?
One of the biggest things that I look back and I see now, I was very hesitant to enter the relationship anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because I had just lost my husband,
Absolutely.
and it was horrible. And I didn't want to be in a relationship. I was just in a situation where guys were hitting on me at my husband's funeral. They were showing up at
Oh
me at
my
my partner.
gosh. You've
Yeah, it
got to
was.
be kidding me.
Yeah, there was like a 6 week span where there was like a whole lot
Yeah.
of trauma
Yeah. Now, how
that was
old were you
just.
when you lost your husband?
I was 30.
See, and that I think adds a whole different layer because you're so young and so in the middle of the best part of your life, really.
Yes, my 30s were horrible.
I'm
I would,
sure. I'm sure.
yeah, because I mean, the abusive relationship lasted pretty much all of my 30s.
Wow.
But I just needed a friend. And that's what he was at first. And he was cool with that. And I kept telling him, like, I don't want a relationship. I'm not ready for one. And he just kind of slowly moved in. And I just wanted like a guy around that would kind of like get the other guys to leave me alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was fine for a little while. And then he kept pressuring for more and more relationships. But if I look back, to answer your question, because I kind of went on this big circle here, is that the way he treated his mother, because you have to realize a man's mom is the most important woman in his life, and she always will be.
Wow. So how did he treat his mom?
He kind of talked down to her. They fought a lot, and he talked trash about her all the time, about how mean she was and how abusive she was to him and things like that. And if I look at that again, especially now that I have a much healthier, happier relationship, there is a drastic difference. I mean, I would much rather have a mama's boy than somebody who is trash talking their mom.
Absolutely.
Because if he is downgrading and being abusive and rude to his mother, who is the most important woman in his life,
right?
What's he going to do to you?
Right. The other big red flag, and I'm definitely, I want to make this very clear, absolutely no victim blaming or shaming in the least. If there is abuse in a relationship that you're in, that abuse is not your fault. And so that is something I want to say right then and there. But as women, there are definitely things that we can look at. And I think that it starts with us. Healthy attracts healthy. And
that's so very, very true and underestimated. People are just not listening enough about that.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead and talk about that.
All right.
I love it. I love your passion.
People are not listening about the whole healthy being healthy. If you've been in a traumatized relationship before, and you haven't taken the time to really dig in and heal, you're going to repeat that pattern, because you're going to draw that to you without even knowing. And you become people with childhood trauma, or, they had a bad relationship in high school or college or whatever it may be. There's so many bad relationships out there that it's ridiculous. But if you're still carrying that around, and if you haven't done the work,
right,
and really dug into your reasoning for why you are triggered about different things, then you haven't done the work and you're not healed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot of work. And people today are so afraid of being triggered. Yes. I see it all the time, especially with this book. They're like, I couldn't finish it. I just had to stop. I can't do it. And they're only a couple chapters in, and I'm like, man, it hasn't even really started yet. Wow. And I'm sorry that people are triggered. I'm sorry that it's hard for them. But there is one thing that I do know, and I say this with authority, having talked to many health care professionals, many doctors of psychology, and having experienced it myself. If you are afraid of your triggers, then you're not going to heal. Triggers are a good thing. You need to embrace them, because embracing them, even though your story is not my story, if you are triggered by something in my book or something that you see on TV, acknowledge that feeling. Your body and your mind is trying to tell you something. If you are triggered, you need the book.
That is so profound. I love that you said that. Hard words to hear. Because none of us want to feel uncomfortable. None of us want to feel bad, but it is through adversity that we grow. We don't grow in the good times of life.
No, we don't. I mean, think about a cancer patient. Do you think they're having a good time with that chemotherapy?
Right.
But it can save their lives.
Wow.
Just like being triggered and embracing those and realizing that your feelings are valid.
Yes.
That's what that trigger is telling you. It's like, hey, you feel this way, and that's okay. Those are your feelings.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with being sad. There's nothing wrong with being triggered at all. There is no guilt here.
Right.
So you need to recognize it and embrace it. It is your truth.
so good. I love it because that is truly the only way we heal. And gosh, so powerful.
Well, it's so important to use that too.
Yeah.
I always suggest, get a journal, and you're in that emotional crisis state, write everything out. Even if it doesn't make any sense, if you're not a writer and you don't have access to that, grab your cell phone, do like a voice recording, whatever you got to do. And then when you're out of that emotional crisis, review it. Start reviewing some of the things that you've said or some of the things that you've written down, and you'll start to see your patterns. And then you can ask yourself why, and that's how you dig in. And it is a tremendous tool to take to your therapist or your support person, because let's face it, if you're going to therapy, you're going once or twice a month, a little more often if you're lucky, and they can't help you if they don't have anything to work with. Because what if you go in those 2 times a month and you're in a good space that day?
That's right.
You can take those tools where you weren't in a good space and say, hey, this is what I was feeling during this. That gives them a way to help you. And that's how you heal, is by acknowledging it instead of burying it.
That's so good. That is so good. So when you were going through the abusive relationship and kind of right at the start, did you have a good support system around you, strong friends, being advocates at all, or was there just, you were just kind of buried in your grief? What did that look like?
I was on my own. My family, my friends were not there for me because, I mean, even I'm from Appalachia, and around here, it's very traditional. And I grew up, if there's a loss in the family or something, you bring over food, you go check on the widow, you go check on the family. Well, none of that happened.
Wow.
I think I complained once, and like my cousin brought me a couple of pizzas, and I had like 3 little kids and 3 step teenagers and a step grandson. And like, I had all of this going on. I had no support.
Wow.
None.
Well, and that makes a huge difference. I was talking to someone today about just the abuse that I went through. And I had friends who came to me afterwards and said, oh, I'm so glad that you're not with him anymore. We hated him. And I thought, why didn't you tell me that? That would have been great information to have, but not, and maybe I wouldn't have listened. But I think that not having a support system just adds to that, especially if you're grieving and you're looking for somebody who can be a support system, who can be an advocate for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think that families and friends really understand. And that's why, that's another reason why this book is so important. And I'm not just saying it because it's mine, but books like this are important because it gives you their perspective. Because you don't know, then you don't understand. And it's okay to not understand, but ask them.
So what would you suggest then to family members and friends if you see a loved one going through an abusive relationship, or they're starting a situation where it just doesn't look healthy? What would you recommend people do?
Talk to them, stay close, even if they are pushing you away, because oftentimes an abuser will make sure that that person is separated out, and it happens in such a covert way that you don't really realize what's happening. Nobody really does. It's important to be there. It's important to listen and not judge what they're saying. Give them that outlet without judgment, without any preconceptions. Don't put your opinion into it. Let them talk.
Yes.
Because they will come to it on their own. And if you push them and say, hey, I think you're in an abusive relationship, you need to get out, it's not as simple as that. It never is, because either one, they don't realize they're in an abusive relationship. Maybe they're thinking, well, something's just not right, and it might just be me.
Right.
But eventually they will come to it on their own.
Absolutely.
And that's really important, to let them and be that person that can catch them when they fall, because they will.
That's really good advice. So how did you get out of this relationship? What did that look like for you?
It was really not your traditional way out. I had 3 kids, he had 1, and I couldn't have anywhere to go with me and 3 kids. There was no shelters. There was not the family that could take us in. There was none of that. So a year or two before, because it was a process of me figuring out, hey, okay, I'm in an abusive relationship. How the heck do I get out of this? And I wasn't leaving my home because I didn't want to be out in a car or a van that was also in his name as well, because it was joint, both names were on it. So and I didn't even have a driver's license.
Wow.
And it was just one of those situations where I couldn't leave. So it was kind of slowly convincing him to leave.
Oh, wow.
Convincing him that it was over. So it was one brutal battle of the mind at a time, and standing up for myself. And there was a lot of situations that I went through that kind of muddied the waters even more. But eventually it was standing up one day at a time and saying, no, you have to get a job. No, I want a divorce. And that was after I spent time saying, we need to work on this relationship. If it's going to work, these are the changes I need to see. That was after trying to convince him to seek therapy, which a narcissist will never do.
Right.
And it was just standing up one battle at a time. And eventually he was like, well, I can't go anywhere. I don't have the money to afford it. I'm like, I don't care. I'll give you money. That's cool. I'll give you money.
Right. Wow.
So it really did come down to that. And eventually he found another target, which made it a little easier. And by another target, I mean, he cheated on me.
Yeah.
And like at the time I was not thinking about it. I'm like, okay, good. He's distracted. I can get him out. But even though he had another target, you would think that it would get easier on me, but it most certainly did not. It got worse. And so he's cheating. I know he won't admit it. Eventually I get him out, and he would not leave until the court hearing on the day of the divorce. He would not leave, not until then. So I asked for a divorce, filed for the paperwork, agreed to all of his demands. He's cheating on me. He has somebody else. He's doing all these other things, but he will not leave my house until, it's signed, sealed, and delivered. So that was pretty awful. But something really awesome that came out of that. I mean, I hated that his new target was such a sweet woman. She really, really is. And I kept those lines of communication open just in case she needed me. And a couple years later, she did.
Wow. And she reached out to you.
Yes. And I helped her and talked her through things. And we did some comparing, and it really helped her. I mean, it validated me quite a bit too.
Absolutely.
But it helped her realize, okay, these are the same patterns. This is definitely abuse. I need to get out before it gets worse. And her receiving her freedom is what inspired me to go into advocacy training and to continue working with other survivors.
That is absolutely a beautiful story. And I love that, because you saw that as an opportunity to help somebody else, not to get jealous, but you saw that as an opportunity to give of yourself. And what an amazing story that is. Oh, wow.
Well, she's a beautiful person. And I mean, he may have cheated on her with me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I didn't care. And it wasn't her fault.
Yeah.
It really wasn't. She didn't know.
Yeah. Wow. That is great. So tell me about your advocacy today. What kind of work are you doing, and what does that look like?
So technically, I don't do that much with the advocacy center because I'm farther away and I live in a really small town. So there's not a whole lot I can do, but I am on the crisis line once a week. So people that call the rape crisis line, they'll get me once a week. And honestly, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and I talk to a lot of people on social media that are going through different things and just need to talk. And I can get much more personal with them. And I absolutely love that.
That is so great. And I think it's, when we use our story, when we use our testimony to help other people, that just makes such a huge difference, not only in their lives, but our lives and our healing. That's
It
wonderful.
really does. I think people really underestimate that. It's, kind of goes back to that fear of being triggered because they want to kind of bury what happened to them and forget it that it ever happened and just kind of keep it in the shadows.
Right.
But, that's not helping yourself, and that's not helping anyone else. So
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about the books and how you started as a writer, and just how that has been a healing tool for you.
for Within the Gray, it was my escape a little bit. And if you haven't read it, it has a lot of psychological dreams and visions that goes through the loss of her husband, and it mirrors what she's going through in her real life. And for me, that was kind of creating all of the things that I needed in life. And that was a strong support person that didn't have an ulterior motive, really.
Right.
That cared more about me than they did themselves. And there's a whole story behind that. And I needed to get mental help, and I needed to be kind of admitted and taken care of for a little while. And my main character does that, where I did not. So all of the decisions that I wanted to make and all the things that I wanted to have in real life happens Within the Gray, with Sheila'sMen. And that's how I coped with my husband's loss. And that's how I started to heal and started to see everything that was happening in my life. That helped me recognize the abuse.
Right.
And then Sheila'sMen, at first it was, I'd already went through quite a bit of healing. And as I was writing it, because whenever I write it, I very much step back, even though it's written in first person. I'm going through the plot line and I'm looking at it from an outsider's perspective. And I started to see patterns, and then I would talk to someone. I was like, okay, so this is what I see. And being able to forgive myself for the things that I did that I am so not proud of, but I did not hold back those things. Because as I continued writing and just being completely honest with everything that I did, everything that I went through, my thoughts, my feelings, and just how real it was, really was something that helped me tremendously. But as I started to heal, and as I was about halfway through the book, it really wasn't about me anymore, because I knew that I wasn't the only one, and that people needed to hear it. Because and not just all the things that he did, but all the things that I did, because we sometimes make mistakes and do things that we're not proud of. But when we're going through those types of abuses and traumas, and where we're losing ourselves, we can't be ashamed of that. And we have to realize it wasn't us who did it.
Right.
For me, it was that desperate part of myself that just wanted someone to care about me.
Yeah.
For, pushed me into doing some things that I shouldn't have done. But I wouldn't change those things, because I was after something that I needed. And it was from a point of desperation.
Right. So talk about your really the recovery from the abuse, recovery from trauma, and what that looked like for you. And I know that's a forever journey, but talk about that a little bit.
It is, but it isn't. I think that I've grown so much as a person just by being honest with myself. Even while he was still there, because, like I said before, he would not leave. I did a lot of soul searching. I started reaching out, to therapists. I was texting them. I had actually met a very strong support person, which was very much almost exactly like the person Within the Gray. It was like I kind of wrote it into existence. So and he and I became very close friends, and he's a psychology student. So I had like an extra therapist. So it was a lot of talk therapy. It was a lot of journaling and being honest with myself and digging in and asking why and recognizing my own patterns, and then imagining the life that I wanted. And it started just very simply as making a list of all the things that I wanted to do. And sure, it started out with big things like I want to go to Italy. But it ended up being something as simple as I wonder what kind of car I like. And like that was a really big thing for me because my abuser was this huge car guy. And I was buying him vehicles, and I had a minivan because I had kids and stuff. So stepping out and asking myself what I wanted was one of the most liberating and telling experiences I've ever had, because I was going from car lot to car lot, not thinking about what my dad, my brother, my ex-husband, or, the guy friends that I had, I did not care what they thought. I just went and I looked for myself, and not having someone else's opinion, and just really looking at what I wanted is a tremendously valuable exercise. So if you go to start making a list and it seems kind of silly and it starts out really big, you keep doing it, you'll find those little things.
That's great.
I started painting again. I started writing more. I left my big job and I went back to school and took some creative writing classes, and I completely reinvented myself.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So what would you tell people who are going through that very thing? They're either in an abusive relationship, they want to get out, or they're in an abusive relationship and they just don't even know what to do, or what would you say?
I always recommend, it's always a good idea to call your crisis centers, call those people that have different resources in your area, because they can tell you what is available to you. And even if there's nothing available, there's somebody to talk to. You need someone to talk to, and you need to believe yourself, because you're going to feel like something's wrong. You're going to know that you're hurting. Even if someone's trying to tell you that it's your imagination or it's your fault, because that's what narcissists do. And it's okay to recognize and believe in yourself. And when you believe in yourself, a part of you knows that you are worth so much more. You are so much better than what you are going through. And that will help you find your strength one day at a time. Remember who you are. Talk to whoever you can. There's national crisis lines, there's local ones. Even if that's all you have and you don't have anywhere to go, start there. Because that's how you'll find your strength. And believe me, if you put in the work, if you're someone that's left, and if you haven't gone through the healing, then your mind hasn't completely left and you're still locked up in that cage, even though you're physically not there. Allow yourself to be triggered. Do the work, because I'm telling you, on the other side of that is a life so beautiful that you cannot even imagine it. You will love deeper, the sun will be brighter, and the world will have so much more peace around you when you find yourself and you escape, not only physically, but your mind needs to escape too, because that's when you're going to find joy again, because it's just like any other near-death experience. Maybe it's not a physical death that you're looking at, but a mental one. That you appreciate life in a way that you never knew possible.
That's absolutely beautiful. I love that. And I think that so often we don't take the time to just heal and just be. I know that you work with Christian pastors and things like that. Can you speak to that faith piece at all? Because I think sometimes we tend to want to rush into something else. I'm going to leave this horrible situation. I'm going to go to something else. But there is something so important about recognizing that, I don't have to do it all. So Can you speak to that at all?
You don't have to do it all. I mean, you
Mhm.
need to take it one day at a time. And sometimes you need to rest in that
Yeah.
peace and find your place and wait for guidance. It's okay to not be in a hurry, because when you've
Right.
been through things, you need that time. You truly, truly do. And you can't feel guilty for leaving a relationship, because so many
Mhm.
scriptures that say so many different things, and that's okay. But know this: God doesn't want you hurting. He
Right.
doesn't want his beautiful creation destroyed.
Right. And abuse is definitely off the table. And so if you are in an abusive relationship, that is not something that God would want in your life. And it is so important to get out of that relationship and get healthy
And it's
and
not up
find
to
that.
you to save them. It is not up to
Oh, oh, good point. Yes.
it
Yes.
is not up to you to bring them to God. That is God's job, not yours.
We're not Holy Spirit Junior. I think one of the things that is so important that you say that, because so many times there will be that, well, every time I say I'm going to leave, they threaten to take their life, that is so hard, but that's not our choice we need to really make sure that we are okay doing what we need to do. We can't live life so that somebody doesn't do this or whatever the case may be.
We're not responsible for other people's decisions. We're
Right.
responsible for our own decisions and how we react to theirs. And you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. And trust me, many of us are mothers.
Yeah.
Your children are hurting way more than you think they are, because my healing process compared to theirs was drastically fast. They are still suffering.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how did your children respond to the abuse and respond to the leaving? What was their, I know you can't necessarily tell their story, but their experience. So we as moms understand what is going on with the children.
Oh, it's so hard to describe. I know um, they it's been very difficult for them. I mean, I got to a point where I would take the kids out once a week or twice a week whenever I would have time off from work.
Mhm.
And we would be driving down the road in the van, and I'd be like, okay, let it loose, whatever's
Wow.
going on. And they would just, I mean, it was like crazy town there for a minute, because
Yeah.
everybody's talking, and it's like the total vent session for them to get that off of their chest, because at that point they were young teenagers.
Okay.
And they knew what was going on. They were spending a lot of times in their rooms, but they were getting blamed for things left and right. And that's all that I had to offer them at that time. Whenever he finally left, I think actually it started happening beforehand, right before he left. My son actually became very suicidal and was
Oh my
cutting,
gosh, I'm
and he
sorry.
was actually hospitalized twice.
Ugh.
And that kind of staggered through all of the kids, because once he left, they were finally able to let go of that tension and recognize what they were going through too.
Wow.
But it's harder for kids to kind of recognize and bring all of those things out and really understand what was happening to them. And so it's still an ongoing process as
Yeah,
far as mental health is concerned. It's very
that's hard.
difficult.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to remember is that um it's definitely an entire family issue, and it affects us all tremendously. And people will say, oh, kids are resilient, and that kind of resilience is not they are not. I think that saying is just kind of, so we as adults can do whatever we want and they'll bounce back, but the reality is that things like that can change who they are. And so when yeah.
We have some really major issues, actually, life changing, life altering. We've
Yeah.
got to, but their frontal lobes, whenever that
Mhm.
doesn't fully develop until you're about 25.
Yep.
So we're hoping and trying, we've got time to fix things.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so there's a lot of heavy concentration on taking care of them right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good for you. and you're doing the right thing. You are, I just really appreciate your story. I appreciate what you have shared. You are so honest and transparent, and that's what people need. They need to know that, we need to get rid of the stigma of this is what I've gone through, and let's help each other, be advocates for each other, and really help each other out of these situations, because they can be deadly.
They are,
no doubt.
the other. A lot of women don't it's fully escape. And I touched on this earlier. So many women either end up being murdered by their abusers, which is a very real thing, and or they commit suicide, or they stay trapped in that mindset for the rest of their lives. And that's what this book is about. And I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything else.
Toot it.
It's important. It's so important. I didn't write it just to have a book out there to be published and for people to buy. That's not why that book is out there. Sheila'sMen is important. It needs to be read. It can make a difference, not only for survivors to help with their own journey and help them to understand themselves, but for co-survivors, friends, and family that maybe they don't understand. We need to have more conversations. We need to be honest about the mindset and what's going through our head, instead of putting a cute little label on it. Oh, he's just a narcissist, or oh, it's just gaslighting. Oh, of course you're having suicidal thoughts. Everybody has that. Oh, but that's selfish, because it's not selfish.
Right.
Because you don't necessarily want to die. I mean, for people that may watch this that are suicidal, I'm not trying to mock how you're feeling at all. I'm sure a part of you is very much feeling like you want to die, but I need to ask you something. Is it because you want to die, or is it because you want to stop the life you're currently living? And I need you to think about that. And that's where we are. And we need to stop being afraid of being triggered, being afraid of our own thoughts and emotions, and wanting to push them aside, because they're ours and they're valid. Whether anybody agrees with you or not, your thoughts and emotions are valid, and they are a part of you. And there's nothing wrong with that.
That's amazing. So please tell us how we can find you, how we can find your books, and get in touch with you and the amazing work you're doing.
So I'm super easy to find. I'm most active on Facebook. It's facebook.com/author Jenna Ashlyn. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. And if all else fails, you can Google me, because I come up rather easily. I keep checking that, and it keeps growing. So it's great. So I'm really easy to find. I definitely recommend finding my email list. That way you can keep up to date. But if you don't go anywhere else, go to Facebook. That's going to be your best bet, because I'm most active there. And you can find my books anywhere.
Good.
Easiest is always Amazon. It's on Google Play, Barnes and Noble's, absolutely everywhere. At brick and mortar stores, you are going to have to order it because they're slow. But you can find it anywhere.
That is great. And we will make sure to put all those links below, so that you in the below, there's not necessarily a below, the comments in the podcast, we'll make sure to have all of that available for you, so that people can reach you, Jenna. Because
yes, please reach out. I don't mind talking to people. I actually love talking to people. And if you're reading the book and you have questions, concerns, or you're just having a hard time, I'm here for you.
That's awesome. Okay, final question. What does resilience mean to you?
What does resilient? I was supposed to be prepared for that.
If you listen to the podcast at all, yes.
Yes, I know. I was supposed to be prepared for that. Whoa. Okay. For me, resilience is never giving up and believing in yourself and knowing that there is a better path ahead.
I love that. Just beautiful. Thank you so much, Jenna, for sharing your story, for sharing your heart. And I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy I could be here.
And thank you, listeners, for listening to Resilience in Life and Leadership. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please share with anyone you think will benefit from this podcast.